Welcome to the Roost News, the place for all things volunteer. I am Lillian Lee, co-lead for the Roost News, and we have special guests with us today. The topic, EmpowerU at AARP University. Our guests today are Mike Olender, State Director for AARP North Carolina, Audrey Galloway. She is the Manager Outreach for AARP North Carolina. We have Helen Mack. She's the State President for the Executive Council for AARP North Carolina. And we have Pat Battle, who is on the Executive Council for AARP North Carolina. Welcome to the Roost News. Before we get started, thank you. Before we get started with this topic of EmpowerU, and I know that our listening audience, which are AARP volunteers and AARP staff, you want to know more. I just know you do just because I said EmpowerU. But before we get started, we always like to find out a little about our guest. So we're going to start with Mike, Audrey, Mack, and Pat. And I'd like for you to share, even though I gave you a title, I would like for you to share a little bit about you. What does that title mean? How long have you been working with AARP, and why AARP? I know it's going to be hard, but if you can sum that up in 3 or 4 sentences, that would be great. Mike.
Hi, Lillian. Thanks so much for having me with you today. I've been with AARP for 17 years now. Started at AARP New York as an Associate State Director. And then over the course of time, made my way down to North Carolina, again, serving there in Charlotte as an Associate State Director. And then moving up to Manager and ultimately to State Director. And essentially, my job is to lead the team, to develop and execute a state plan that helps AARP be the best organization it can be for people 50 plus in North Carolina.
Great. Audrey.
Hi, Lillian. Thank you for the introduction. I have been with AARP approaching 13 years, and my role as Manager of Outreach, I have 5 staff who are direct reports for me. They serve, each one of them has a region in North Carolina in which they serve. Volunteers in those regions, partners delivering on the AARP mission. I view my role as their support system, their backup. I provide resources, I provide advice. I am their partner as they deliver this on-the-ground outreach work, making a difference for the 50 plus population in their region.
Okay, Mack.
Thanks, Lillian. So I am the state president. That's my role now. And I have been doing AARP work now I'm moving into my 2nd decade doing it. I see myself as the president being the one who helps coordinate between the staff and the executive council. And I chair the executive council, and that's made up of representatives from across the state. So I see myself as the person who helps coordinate the voices of the volunteers for AARP. And I chose AARP because I think it's one of the few places, and it's a very powerful, trusting organization that really has the voice of the aging adult. And that's extremely important to me since I'm doing that aging. Thanks.
Right. Pat?
Hi, Lillian. Thank you. And thank you to the folks on the call as well. I consider myself a volunteer and always will be, no matter what the position that I hold with AARP. But yes, I started about 7 years ago, just volunteering locally, and then throughout was appointed on the executive council, always advocating for the 50 plus here locally in my region in Charlotte, as well as on the state level as well. And like the rest of the folks on this podcast, again, supporting the 50 plus, advocating for the 50 plus in different levels and in different manners, but as always volunteering and advocating for folks who look like me, talk like me, and who live like me. And so, yes, that's what I do.
Oh, great. Well, to our listeners, we know that we have a powerhouse here. All employees or volunteer for AARP North Carolina. So let's transition back to EmpowerU at AARP University. What was that about? I know it was held a couple of months ago. What was the premise behind AARP University? Why have this university? Who was involved? I know I have a lot of questions, but we'll give you time to answer them. Who was involved? And please share why you took a role as a part of this. And I believe there was a committee, if I'm not mistaken, that formulated this. And then I think another question that came to my mind was this like Mike, he's in charge from the top down, or how did this all come about and why?
I think that's an Audrey question, and she
She's
chaired
working on
this
it,
committee,
yes.
and it was a committee. Audrey?
Yeah, so we have done AARP universities in the past with North Carolina, and we have planned on offering an additional AARP university, I think last year. And Mike and I talked, and the timing just wasn't right, but we decided at the end of last year that we were going to do it this year, that we really needed to bring together volunteer leaders for essentially a learning and planning our opportunity, but with the volunteers as focus. And so that's what AARP University was about, was bringing in volunteer leaders and emerging leaders to learn, to share, to find out about important initiatives we were going to be working on in 2024, including voter engagement, which was a priority, and to also make sure that volunteers had all of the resources, knowledge, and skills that they needed to go back into their regions to do the work. And we couldn't think of a better way to do it than to bring all the volunteers together from across the region, particularly because volunteers like Pat, who does great work in the Charlotte region, she may not know some of the volunteers in the mountain region. And this was going to be an opportunity for all of those volunteers to meet, get to know each other, and find out what work they share or what approaches they have in common.
Great, great. Well, I noticed you kept talking about regions, and in North Carolina, there are 5 regions. Were there volunteer staff from all 5 regions? Were they selected?
I'll take that on.
Okay.
We used to be, many years ago, 10 years ago, very highly centralized here in Raleigh. Basically, all the staff, worked out of this office. And it was very difficult to consistently engage all the corners of the state, in particular, all 5 metropolitan areas,
Mhm.
in an equitable fashion, just simply because it involves everybody traveling all the time. And it's really hard to build the types of relationships that you need to do that work successfully if you're, centrally located in Raleigh. And so the office was decentralized, and staff were placed out into 5 regions of the state, where we still have staff here in Raleigh, but also staff based now in Asheville in the mountain region, Charlotte region, the Triad region, and the coastal region out in Wilmington. And this allows staff to be able to consistently engage volunteers and the public and partners in meaningful ways, to have an ear to the ground and to get a good, solid understanding of what the needs are at the community level, because that's so important. As an organization, I want to make sure that we're putting our resources where it's needed. We just don't want to show up and put our logo somewhere and do something that's meaningless. We want to be meaningful, and we want to make sure we're having an impact. And that is especially important for our volunteers, because they could be doing anything with their time, and they don't want to put on a dog and pony show. They want to really affect change. And so this is really key to our success, is having our state organized this way, because every region is different. They're all great. They all have got their strengths and their areas of issues that they focus on. And it allows us overall to be a more effective organization.
Right. Well, I know that the volunteers were there and the staff. Did you invite others, say, from the national office, and what was the purpose of inviting someone outside of the state?
I can tell you that we certainly had national people there and very much so wanted volunteers to meet these people
Okay,
because a lot of the programs are coming out of national, but they have to have a North Carolina flavor to them. And the volunteers are the ones delivering that information. So we had someone from what is the Office of Community Engagement who kicked us off the first night, and we were actively engaged in learning things the very first night we were there. And that was Mike Kulik. And then we also had someone from the Office of Volunteer Engagement, and that was Will Stoner. And he motivated people to really look at what the role of a volunteer is, and then promised all of us, as we're all becoming leaders and stepping up on the ladder of engagement, that we're all going to get leadership pins. And that was
great.
extremely motivational also. Do you have something to add to that, Audrey?
Yes, and in addition, we had from campaigns, our National Campaigns Office, we had Natalie Shortell, who's a regional advisor, and she was kind of our national voice on our voter engagement plan and how we're going to engage volunteers there. And we did have one external guest who was Dr. Andy Taylor, who's a professor of political science at North Carolina State University. He is well respected in the world of political talking heads in North Carolina. And we held AARP University 2 weeks after the state primary. And Dr. Taylor's role was to come in and to provide some takeaways from the primary results there. And he was the first full day, so he kind of laid the foundation and laid our understanding of what our voter engagement work might look like.
Great, great.
So we were really pleased to have him as a part of it. And I do want to say that, you know, Mack is mentioning the partnerships with external partners and internal partners. And I want to point out that she served on the planning committee, as did Pat Battle. And they both brought this perspective of this is what volunteers need to know. This is what volunteers may not know. And this is what we should bring to volunteer experience. And so their voices were instrumental in this being a successful event. We could not have done it without the volunteer voice as part of the planning process.
Let's build upon that a little bit. Pat and Mack, as a part of the committee, I know that other than just these national speakers, the volunteers were involved in breakout sessions or workshops. You want to share a little bit about the types of workshops that they were invited to participate?
Well, yes, I just wanted to double back on some of the things that Mike and Audrey and Mack talked about in terms of the regions. I think that was for me a great experience because oftentimes when you're in your particular local areas, you live in a bubble and you are just focusing on what's going on locally in your community. And the fact that North Carolina is divided in these regions is, I think, what our secret weapon is, and for our success here in this state is because we have that diversity, we have that variety, we have folks who are, you know, subject matter experts in their particular regions, but then in EmpowerU, you bring that all together. And it's just like creating the ultimate smoothie. We have strawberries and berries and everything in that. And it's just a great mixture of folks. And so added onto that are the national folks, where we did the breakouts and we learned about everything from media relations to understanding about the movable middle, about folks who we're trying to reach, who are at a different age group coming in, to so many other aspects. So I think for me, and this was my first AARP University, I had a great experience in that. Yes.
Okay, would anyone else like to share some of the topics covered at the breakout sessions?
So I will say that, you know, one of our largest focus was voter engagement because that is a priority for 2024 with it being an election year.
Mhm.
So most of our general sessions were about voter engagement.
Okay.
Our general sessions were those sessions where everybody was in attendance. So we were making sure we were delivering the same messaging to everyone at the exact same time. We also had some sessions on active listening. I think, Mack, you were a lead on that. And we had folks, and Pat referenced the media that's a part of that, telling our story for volunteers. We had sessions on recruiting and engaging and empowering volunteers. We did some work on programs like livable communities
Mhm.
and advocacy, and then we did some outliers that impact the work that we do, like digital transformation and social determinants of health. So our programming was broken out into really developing skills for the volunteer, providing resources for the volunteer, as well as some foundational laying engagement and activations. It was a very diverse group of sessions. But I think what made the session so great was, again, I have to go back to the volunteer
The
voices.
volunteers, great.
Having Mack and Pat and Karen Seagraves, who's another member of the executive council, having
Mhm.
them as a part of the planning committee made the world of difference in this AARP University, because they were able to say, I'm a volunteer.
Mhm.
This is what I need. This is what matters to me. This is what I need to know. And we were able to craft programming around their voices and their
Excellent.
input.
Excellent. Well, the volunteers and staff who are listening, I hope you're taking notes, because this is some valuable information to have if you decide that you want to do an AARP University in your state. So let's think a little bit more. I'm going to ask Mike this question. So, because you've been to the other AARP University that Audrey mentioned, correct? Okay. And the feedback about this particular AARP University, that it was wonderful, great session, people left feeling good about the information received. But how would you compare this one to the prior AARP University? Had you learned something at the prior one to bring over to this one? Or have you learned something for this one? Because when people left, what did I hear? Oh, we can't hardly wait until next year, next year for next year's AARP University. Talk a little bit about results, Mike.
Well, I have to say, this was the best AARP volunteer conference I've ever experienced,
Oh,
just
okay.
hands down. And I don't say that just because my team put it together. And it's, it's true. It really was, and I say that too, knowing this, no, saying, acknowledging this was not a top-down organized event. This was something where I was very
Excellent.
hands-off and told Audrey and Mack to take this where it needs to go. They made a compelling case for why this was important, and we really could not wait to do it again. And they committed to bringing together all the, a good group of voices to structure the best program possible, and to really pay a lot of attention to detail. And I think, a couple of reasons why this was so good. One was, I think, timing after COVID.
Okay.
People were really just ready. I think maybe if we did it last year, like we originally were hoping to do, it might have been a little too early, because people were still just kind of, they were back, connecting together as groups, but people
Right.
lost a lot of soft skills during
Mhm.
COVID. And then I think that extra year really made a difference, because people were, not only interacting, but literally dancing on one of the nights when we had a reception, an award, giving out the Andrus Award to Jean Van Dippender for her wonderful work from 2023. And that dance floor was just live the whole time. And that probably wouldn't have happened a year before. People, some people probably would have chose to sit it out, just because of comfort levels and people not quite, being in that pre-pandemic groove.
Right.
But the biggest thing was, so I'd say the timing, and the other was just really the attention to detail. Audrey in particular is somebody who pays a lot of attention to detail. She is meticulous when it comes to thinking things through. And being that she manages our outreach team, our staff, who work very directly with about 5 volunteer networks throughout the state. She has her ear to the ground. She is a conduit, I'd say, from our associate state directors as to what's going on and what's important and what volunteers are saying. And couple that, the voices of Mack and Pat and Karen, who are themselves volunteers. We have a real direct line to what are the volunteer needs, what are the types of trainings and information that they need, and how to deliver it. And the diversity of trainers, the formats were different. We had some sessions where there were panelists sitting up on bar stools in the front of the room. We had others which were the guest speaker with a podium being much more formal with a PowerPoint presentation, that type of thing. We had these breakout sessions, these workshops that were each done in a very different way, a wide range of topics, and they were repeat topics too. So if you couldn't see it the first time, you had another chance to see it the second time. And a great venue, and everything just came together. And I'm not surprised that we got such great feedback.
Yes.
And requests for us to do this again next year.
Right. Well, Mike sort of alluded to something that I was going to ask next, but I'm still going to say it. All work and no play, whatever that statement is. So it appears that there was a lot of fun on one of the nights. Well, I'm sure it was fun all during the session, but there was one night set aside specifically for the dancing, for the camaraderie, for the, what is that old saying, let your hair down maybe. But anyway, people enjoyed that particular evening. So if you're listening to this, listeners, remember, you can do all the work you can to make this a wonderful conference, a wonderful workshop, whatever title you want it to give to it, university, but also add a fun component in there. Make sure that you give the participants an opportunity to have fun, to get to know each other on a different level other than sitting in a session. You all have given such valuable information. I want to ask this last question as we bring closure. Is there anything else that you wanted to share about the EmpowerU at AARP University that was not shared during this podcast? I'm not going to call names. You all just decide if you have something else you would like to share.
Lillian, I'll just add actually one thing to add that I think made a difference with what you said with that reception. It wasn't just a normal reception, like, okay, we're going to have dancing too and give out an award. People were asked to dress up. It was made more formal. And I know some people said, oh, why do we have to do that? But on the night that it happened, it was clear, it felt like a wedding, and it truly felt like a celebration because people looked everybody looked fantastic, and people were dressed up and were wearing, wonderful dresses, and the gentlemen were all looking spiffy and in suits and such. And again, it had that, someone mentioned, said, this feels a lot like a wedding, and people were dancing like it was a wedding.
Yes.
And that touch, that little enhancement of just saying, hey, for this particular event, bring out your I don't know, your Sunday best, but bring out, don't be wearing your sneakers and your jeans and your AARP t-shirt, dress up a little bit and celebrate and really make a moment. And it really did create a moment. And I think it made a lasting impression.
Great. Anyone else?
Lily, I want to point out two things that I'm going to give to you, Pat. I'm sorry, but I'm going to pass the baton to you.
Yeah.
During the gala, too, I think there were a couple of things that made it, very special. One was we built in the Andrews Award presentation and an opportunity where we've got key volunteer leaders there to see the recipient receive her award. The dancing, dancing in a DJ. And to get people on the floor to start off with, we did have someone create a line dance and teach the line dance. And so by the time the line dance was taught, there were people already on the dance floor, already warmed up and ready to go. So then we just turned the volume up. But one of the things that stands out to me about AARP University, and this is where I'm going to pass the baton to Pat Battle, was the tables. Yes. About midway through the planning process, someone suggested that the regions needed to have these tables or booths at the event where they could showcase the regional work. And Pat, this is where I'm going to pass it on to you, because Pat actually ended up leading the organizing and the setup of those tables. She sent me lots of emails about the length and what we needed. So Pat, passing
Hey,
it to you.
Pat.
So what I was jumping in there to say was about that line dance. There was a sense of community with that. So I think everybody felt that they wanted to participate in that line dance. So I enjoyed that. So yes, having some sort of celebration, and we had a common goal to make sure we learned that line dance. I think that made everybody get involved and have fun. But yes, the region tables, behind it all was just the thought that we all had something amazing going on in our regions, and to put our creativity together on a 6-foot table and see what we came up with was really the star of it all,
Yes.
because oftentimes when you volunteer, you're not looking at what you all are doing and how that translates into something tangible that can sit on a table. And so that was the great thing behind it, but also to get the volunteers together, maybe folks who haven't had an opportunity to work together, and whether they did that in person or by Zoom or however they did it to come together, was also part of the goal behind EmpowerU, was that coming together, that sense of team and that sense of accomplishment that often happens as a volunteer team. So that was tremendous. Plus, it gave us
And I
something
can
to
add,
look at.
sorry, Matt.
Yes, yes,
It gave us something to look at too, of the other regions, and
yes.
that was fantastic too as well. So
Well, we're going to end on Mack. She can give her last comments.
Well, I have to admit that one of the things that I see as what AARP is all about is the engaged volunteer. And for me, the North Star is always how actively engaged are those volunteers. And a criteria for me is as to whether or not something has been successful is the energy level of those volunteers as they're going out the door. Now, the energy level coming in was phenomenal, and I thought, oh, this might be the one time my criteria doesn't work. Well, it did work because people left that place with a purpose of what they were going to do when they got back in their region, and their energy level was higher going out than it was coming in. And so for me, North Star is always volunteer engagement, and we had it to the nth degree.
Yes, yes. This is such powerful information, and I hope that those who are listening have not just listened, but taken notes so that you can go back to your state office and say, we need to contact North Carolina. We need to have an AARP University. But one other thing that I remember was that we had a photo booth, and that was a nice added addition to the university, and the participants had fun taking photos and memories to last as they returned home. So with all of this said, I know that the AARP staff and AARP volunteers who are listening will be reaching out to this esteemed group. Well, we hope they will. I know they will, Mike, so be ready, be ready. And I would like to say thank you again to all of you for being part of the Roost News podcast. Thank you to our listeners. Please listen to us on the Roost News podcast on YouTube, as well as on your favorite audio platform. And until next time, we say thank you and have a good day.
thank you.